Hello everyone, this is Direwolf20 and welcome to my mod spotlight on PneumaticCraft. PneumaticCraft is a very different mod from some of the mods that I've played with in the past. It's definitely a tech mod, but the concepts and the way it works are pretty cool. So I'm really excited to show this to you guys. One of the most important things to note about PneumaticCraft is that there's a lot of different tiers of tech. So you start off with a very basic and simple tier of technology to be able to do simple things, but then things, as you can see, quickly escalate to being able to do all kinds of cool stuff with a bunch of different items. So before we get into the cool stuff, I definitely have to show you the basics. So don't worry, we'll get to the cool stuff soon. But there's a lot of things like these different weird plants that are added to World Gen. There's a bunch of different machines to be added, and a really cool system of drones that is kind of like a cross between computers and turtles and like golems maybe from Thaumcraft. And the good news is that there's really not much programming involved, like at all. So if you guys aren't big into programming but you'd like to be able to do some of the things, not all the things of course, but some of the things that turtles can do, then the drones might be right up your alley. So there's a bunch of stuff to start playing around with in PneumaticCraft. Let's get started checking out this mod. And one thing I'll note before we really jump in and get started here is that PneumaticCraft is made by Martin, who is actually one of the winners of Mod Jam. Now, PneumaticCraft was not a Mod Jam mod. It's a mod that he's working on separate from his Mod Jam mod, which was the in-game wiki. He made the in-game wiki hoping that a lot of people would adopt it and start adding stuff to it, but it's really not gotten to where he wants it to be. So he said the in-game wiki might be a little bit boring, but this other mod, PneumaticCraft, is pretty cool. So since my prize for winning Mod Jam as one of the top 3 winners was to get a mod spotlight, can you do it on PneumaticCraft instead of in-game wiki? And I said, I'm okay with that, sure, no problem, if that's what you want to do. So and then I looked at the mod and I said, you know what, this mod deserves a spotlight in its own right. So it's totally awesome. So let's get started checking it out. So one of the few things added to World Gen are a type of plants. There's actually quite a few of them. I think I want to say like almost 16 different plants that you can start off with. And what you're going to find is these plants all have different properties. Most of them are planted by simply dropping the seed on the ground, and it'll automatically plant itself in the nearest available grass or dirt block. And you can see on the tooltip what it can be planted in: dirt, grass, or farmland for the most part, but some of them require netherrack and a couple other types of planting, farmland. Once they're grown full, sometimes they'll do interesting things, like this creeper plant, which explodes and actually shoots another seed out into the world. And you can see now that it's actually replanted itself, and another one has been planted here. So if you let these guys run for a while, you'll quickly have some self-replicating plants. Cool, huh? Now there's a bunch of different ones. The slime plant seeds, as we can see here, can go right there, and we'll see what this thing does. Slime plant seeds are pretty neat. You'll see here, after a little while, dun 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 dun. Whoa, what happened there? Actually, I have to go back to normal mode. Let's try that again. There we go. Hey there, Mr. Slime. How's it going? So slime plant seeds, pretty useful if you find them. Definitely recommend picking them up because you'll be able to get yourself a decent amount of slimes. Now, of course, as you can see, once it's completed its task there of either ejecting seeds or ejecting slime plants or whatever like that, it does go down to its least grown state. So it has to wait until it fully grows again before it can create another slime for you. Pretty cool, right? Now there's a bunch of different options. Obviously, you won't always get like a full-size slime, as we could see there. It's just like general World Gen of slime. Sometimes they'll be large, sometimes they'll be small. Another one to check out, burst plant seeds. Dun 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 dun. These guys are neat. They too kind of spread seeds the same way as the creeper ones, though they don't have that nifty explosion, but they will kind of shoot out the seeds like that. And each of these seeds, some of them can be used for different things. Helium seeds are kind of neat. They float into the air once they're dropped. And flying flower seeds are also kind of cool. Once they land there and are grown, they kind of float a little bit and then eventually find their way down to the ground. Very neat. So a bunch of different mechanics with these seeds. I'm not going to show them all to you, but there's definitely some cool ones that you're going to want to check out. And it's kind of like the first mod that I've seen that has self-spreading plants like that, where it's just you drop the seed on the ground and it will automatically plant itself, and then some of them will self-spread, other ones won't. Bunch of different plants, like I said. And some of these are used in specific recipes later down, so you're going to want to find these when you can. Now I'm about to show you something else, but I wanted to show you the squid plant because he's one of my favorites. Go, squid plant, go. Nice. All right, so now one of the main items you're going to need to get started using some of the machines in PneumaticCraft is called compressed iron. Now, this is not a world gen ore. You won't be able to find this anywhere underground. What you actually have to do is compress iron. The best way to do that early game is to plant some next to some TNT. Now, I threw a full stack down there, and what you'll quickly notice is that this method of compressing iron is not super efficient. You lose about a third of the iron that you're trying to make there. So you can see we only got 46 compressed iron instead of the 64 that we would have gotten if we had done this a more advanced way. But you really, probably your first set of compressed iron needs to be made with TNT because you're going to wind up using the compressed iron to build the machines that are required for the more advanced versions of compressing. So this is a mod called PneumaticCraft, and you can guess that it's based on pneumatics or compressed air. So how do we compress air? It's actually pretty easy. We need an air compressor. We simply get some compressed iron and a furnace and a pressure tube. Pressure tubes are 2 compressed iron with some glass. You'll get 4 pressure tubes from that. And once we've got that guy placed there, we can go ahead and throw some coal in there to get it cooking. You'll also notice that there's a bunch of different redstone mechanics, like it only works while it's receiving a high or low redstone signal or ignoring redstone altogether. You can also read some information, and there are some upgrades, which we'll take a look at in just a little bit, that you can place in your air compressor to have different effects, like the amount of volume it can store, how fast it operates, and whether or not there's any security, as there is a security feature to this mod. You can see the current pressure that's available and any problems that might be there. For example, right now there's no fuel. Insert any burnable item. Also, air is leaking. Add pipes/machines to the output. So what does air leaking mean? Well, this is a mod about air pressure, and if you don't have a closed system, air will quickly leak out. So how do we close the system? Well, we're going to have to run this pneumatic tube somewhere. So if I just run these pneumatic tubes over here and grab something that can burn, like coal blocks, for example, and throw them in there, what's going to happen is once I apply a redstone signal, or once I set this guy to low redstone, it's going to start burning that coal, and it's going to start building up air pressure, but you'll quickly notice that the air pressure isn't building. That's because it's all leaking out. So as we're making air pressure, it's quickly coming out of this leaked out area here. Now if you want to, you can build up like a nice little closed system like so. There we go. Now we're closed up. So there is a compressed amount of air in here. And if we look inside the pneumatic air compressor here, we'll also see that we're quickly building up pressure inside. Now most machines have 3 meters here. This one only has 2. It has green and red. I'll show you what the third one is about in a minute, but basically green is safe, red is bad. If it gets into the red area, as soon as it hits that red area, it has a chance to explode. It might explode the moment it reaches that red area, or it might explode towards the end of the red area, or anywhere in between. So basically your goal is to make sure that this air compressor is turned off before it hits the red area. So that's going to be bad. And if at any point you start adding on to this machine and system, you might wind up with some leaking air. And as soon as the air starts leaking out, your pressure will quickly start dropping. So you're going to want to make sure to do whatever work you want to do quickly, or build the machines properly so that you don't have any air pressure leaking out. So we're going to let this thing build up some internal pressure and get started working on the next logical step towards this mod, which is probably the compression chamber. So let's get started building our first pressure chamber. This is a multi-block, so I'm going to build it like so. This can be anywhere from a 3x3 to a 5x5 multi-block. And I'm going to build up a 3x3, I think, right now, just to demonstrate to you guys how this works. There's pressure chamber walls, and there's also pressure chamber windows that you can use if you'd like to see what's going on inside. Cool. And then the only other thing that you need to know is that there's something called a pressure chamber valve that's going to act to get the pressure in there. So we're going to need to get that pressure in. You'll see it has like a small hole where we can connect the pneumatic tubes to. So what you're going to want to do with these pressure tubes is get these guys connected out this way and then connect it into here so that you don't lose any pressure. Notice how quickly that operates. Cool. Now let's see what's going on here. If this thing didn't form correctly, which it looks like I must have missed something, we'll have to check out why. I'm thinking maybe break this guy and this guy. And I'm going to put the pressure chamber wall here and the valve here and see if that's a little better. There we go. Now we're talking. So the valve can't be on the base like I showed you there. So now we'll see that we do have some internal pressure building up. So what happens is pressure will balance itself between the two systems. So this guy is currently at 0.6 and this guy is currently at 0.7. So we're kind of sitting right around that point. Okay, they're going to balance themselves accordingly. And I think just like real life pressure, pressure is going to move from a point of high pressure to low, and it's going to try and balance itself out. Now in here you can see that there's some problems. What the pressure chamber does is it allows you to basically craft items using compressed air. Specific recipes are available, and you're going to have to check out the wiki or some further parts of this video to see some of the recipes, but there's a full list of recipes available, or you can click right here to see what the recipes are. So the pressure chamber, if you place 8 blocks of coal in there and you get yourself up to a decent level of pressure, you can get yourself a diamond. If you throw some iron in there and much less pressure required, you can get yourself some of that compressed iron ingots when there's no loss with this. So you don't have to worry about, like with the TNT where we lost iron, no longer will you lose iron. You can also get blocks of iron down to blocks of compressed iron and a bunch of other stuff that we're going to check out in the future. You can see some of these seeds are used for different types of plastic, and a couple other things that we're going to check out, like empty PCBs, etching acid bucket, and a few other things like transistors. Pretty cool. So let's get started making some iron, which we're going to need. Going forward, compressed iron ingots are going to be pretty useful. Now, initially, once you've started off with your design here, there's no way to just throw items in here. That's not going to work. You actually have to get your iron, so let's get some of that. And I'm going to get like half a stack of it. And I'm going to go ahead and break this chamber wall. And when I do that, all the air pressure is going to leak out. And we'll see here our pressure is starting to drop. So quickly throw your half a stack of iron in there and then close up the wall again. Cool. Now, if you do want to be careful how you place those windows, because they might, there we go, orient a little bit differently. Now, if we look in the interface here, you'll note that it has changed its setup. We can see this yellow section here. What the yellow section means is that the machine won't operate until it reaches the green section. So we can see here it's starting to build up pressure as quickly as it can. And this guy's building up his pressure as well. And once it reaches the green section, it's going to be allowed to make the item. And you can see here in the problems, add air to the input. Required pressure 2.0 bars. So it detected that there's iron inside, and it's telling you how far it has to get. And like I showed you with the recipes, if you want to get 8 blocks of coal to a diamond, you have to get it up to 4 bars instead of just 2, which is what's needed for the iron. Okay, you can also throw some upgrades in there to speed this process up. There's the volume upgrade, which allows more air capacity, and then the item life upgrade, which makes sure that items in the pressure chamber cannot despawn. So we might want to throw that item upgrade, or life upgrade guy in there. He's not too hard to make, just some lappies and some apples and a clock. And that'll allow these items to never despawn, because as we know, entities just laying on the ground can eventually despawn. And some of the time it's going to take you a little while to get your pressure up to where it needs to go inside the pressure chamber. So while we're waiting for this pressure chamber to fill up, let's take a look at a couple other things that we can do in the meantime. Alright guys, according to my pressure meter here, it looks like we're about to hit the 2.0 bar here, and that should mean that very shortly we're going to get ourselves some compressed iron ingots. So let's see what happens. If we watch in there, there they go, nice. The iron is getting turned into compressed iron ingots, and once it's done jumping around in there, we'll know that it's finished. Neat. All done. So how do we get them out? Oh, sorry guys, got to break this pressure chamber. Dun 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 dun. There we go. Once we break that, you can see that we lost our upgrade. Everything had to be moved. Pressure chamber wall, pressure chamber window. All right, we lost quite a bit of pressure there, didn't we? This guy, we can see it's balancing out again, right? So we lost all the pressure that was inside the pressure chamber. It went down to 0, but it's quickly balancing out with the air compressor. We can see the air compressor was at 2. He's dropping down to 1. This guy's quickly climbing back to 1. And now it's going to slowly increase the amount of pressure going through there. So that's how we do that. But there's an upgrade here, don't worry, that allows you to do this a little bit more automatically. And for that, we're going to want to take a look at the pressure chamber interface. We're going to actually want 2 of these guys. Let's take a look. So let's go ahead and toss this in here, dun, 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 and place down the pressure chamber interface. So the pressure chamber interface basically has 2 modes, and the way you determine that is how you place the block. I've currently got it set to a mode where it's going to be importing items into the block. So we can see here, interface status import mode. That's because I placed it like this. If we want to get ourselves a mode that can export, we're probably going to want to do the one that's on the bottom of this chamber. So let's break through the ground here, and we're going to go ahead and set this guy. And you'll note now that because the I is on the top and the O is on the bottom, it's now going to be set to an export mode. So we're going to have to climb out of here and close this back up before we can actually, there we go, cool. And if we go digging underground here, we'll quickly see that it is in fact in export mode. Oh neat. And it grabbed the cobblestone And now I'm going to need to get that out of there because I dropped cobblestone in there. But we can see the machine's ready to run. So let's show you guys how to interact with this. The best way is with a hopper. So let's make ourselves a hopper. And I'm going to go ahead and place this guy right there on the side of the block. Now, any items that I place in the hopper will go ahead and land inside the pressure chamber interface and be deposited inside the block. If you want, you can also filter items so that only certain items are allowed into this pressure chamber interface. So, for example, I could filter just based on iron ingots, so only iron ingots will be allowed in here. This makes a lot more sense on the output side because we don't want to allow iron ingots or cobblestone, like this example here, to be output from the system. We only want compressed iron to be in here. So without an item filter, what would happen is iron ingots would go into the system and immediately be exported out of the system, which, that's not at all what we want. We can go ahead and place our hopper here to get our cobblestone deposited into that. We'll get that set up properly in just a moment. But for now, the pressure chamber interface knows that only compressed iron ingots are allowed out of here. And as you start adding more, things in here, you can easily change that. You can also, if you want, use a different type of item filter. Creative tab is only available, I think, on single player, but you can also type in names like item name begins with or item name contains. So if we typed in the word compressed here, that would work as well. But we're going to go ahead and just do it item based because that seems pretty straightforward and easy. Cool. So let's go ahead and set this thing up. I'm going to grab a chest, throw it here, put the hopper on it, and now it's ready to run. Okay, so let's go ahead and drop this guy here, and what's going to happen is we've got this pressure chamber building up. We can see it currently doesn't have much pressure in there. Let's increase that just a little bit by getting ourselves some more air compressors and a few more blocks of coal. So I'm going to place these guys right here and here, and we'll throw some coal in like that. So now we're producing a lot more air pressure a lot more quickly. Once this guy reaches the 2.0 level again, I'm going to go ahead and demonstrate him in just a moment. So let's demonstrate, shall we? I'm going to go throw some iron ingots into the item hopper, and what we'll see here is that it drops the iron ingot into the thing, the little door opens up, and then he's dropped and deposited in here. Now he's not exported yet because he hasn't turned into compressed iron, and he hasn't turned into compressed iron yet because we haven't quite reached the level of pressure that we need him to be. But I wanted to show you the importance of that filter there to make sure you knew why and how this worked. So as we can see, we're quickly dropping in new pieces of iron, one item at a time, and it's slowly but surely being moved in there. So a door opens on this side. It's pretty actually neat to watch. The door opens, the iron is inserted, this door closed, and then this door opens up, the item's allowed inside, and then there it goes. We can also see now, if we take a look downwards a little bit, that the export is working. So I think we've reached that point where we are compressing iron. We can see we've just passed 2.0 in pressure, so actually iron is working now. And once it's turned into compressed iron, the door opens, the item's allowed in, the door closes, and then on the bottom side, a door opens up, which you can't see because the hopper's in the way, but we've actually got proper compressed iron ingots now showing up automatically. So that's how you can automate the pressure chamber, not losing any pressure. And the good news about this whole system is if we set this guy to require a high redstone signal, and remember they're going to operate their last bit of coal there, just like a furnace before they go ahead and turn off. But if you shut off the power here, you no longer need to supply coal to the system. So once you've got a proper pressure balance, it's never going to lose pressure unless you break any pipes or walls or anything like that. So just be careful not to break anything, and you won't have to continue to maintain the pressure. You can set it up however you want. If you do break it, you just have to turn it back on, let it run a little bit longer, and you'll be fine. Now, one thing I should note for you guys, as you'll see here, if you watch real carefully on this thing as it's moving up here, it does dip down briefly every time an interface opens. So when the interface opens, a little bit of air pressure is put into the interface, and it's lost through that opening and closing the door. So not nearly as much air pressure is lost as it would be if you had to break this thing, because then you lose everything inside. But when the doors open, they do lose a little bit of pressure. So don't think it's completely free. You do need to maintain it a little bit to get the crafting done. What won't cause pressure loss is if you just leave this system without iron going in and out of it. If you just leave everything in there and you don't use it at all, that's when the pressure loss won't happen. It'll always maintain the air pressure. But do keep in mind those doors opening and closing, a little bit of pressure is lost there. So you will have to turn these guys on and off occasionally. Now you'll notice also that we're actually getting to a pretty critical point of the amount of air pressure we have. We did turn both these things off, but because they're coal blocks, they're going to last a long time in the air compressor, and we might get to a point where things start having trouble. These pipes here, just like the air compressors, have a limit of about 5 of the bars, I guess it's called, to where they'll be able to maintain that. Anything above 5 and you might start getting into that dangerous territory where you'll have explosions, and we'll probably see an explosion pretty soon here. Once that occurs, I'll show you guys how you can use a little bit of automation to help protect against that. So we're actually getting very close to that 5.0 bar. So now remember, there's 5 bars of pressure everywhere in this system because it is pretty well balanced out. This guy's right around 5 bars now. These guys are each right around 5 bars because of it. Oh, there we go. Hello. Explosion occurred. So the pipes can't handle much more than 5 bars, and you can see we're rapidly losing air pressure. So we need to close this system back up to maintain the pressure. There we go, much better. So we've stopped the air pressure loss. We can see the meter has stopped dropping, and it's starting to climb once again as the pressure balances itself out. Obviously, the pressure chamber can hold a little bit more, overall because of its volume, so it did balance out pretty quickly there. So we want to make sure that these compressor chambers don't have any problems and we don't have any explosions like that, because, hey, who wants explosions in their base? Probably not me. So what can we do about it? Well, don't worry, there's quite a few options available. If we take a look in the PneumaticCraft list, we'll see several different pipes available. Flow detection tube, safety valve, pressure regulator, air grate, and pressure gauge. Let's take a look at each of these now. So the pressure gauge is actually a pretty useful one, obviously. If we go ahead and place this guy right here, it'll go ahead and show us a real-time list of exactly how much pressure is inside that tube. So we can see here that we're actually getting pretty close to 5 again. As a result of that, we're probably going to want to go ahead and release some of this. So we can do a safety valve tube. What this does is the tube will release high-pressure gases when a certain threshold is reached. Though it prevents overpressure, it can be counted as energy loss. So whenever it gets above pressure, it's going to let that pressure out, and that's basically energy loss, because like I told you, anytime you leak pressure, it's wasting that pressure and it's not being able to be used for anything. So let's go ahead and implement this thing before we start having too big of a problem here. So the safety valve, which we'll put right there, there we go. We can see that according to its redstone here, the formula is 7.5 minus redstone times 0.5. Okay. But there's something very important to note, and what that is that the pressure gauge tube actually emits a redstone signal by itself, which the strength of which is dependent on how much pressure the tube is at, and that's 2 times the current pressure bar. So this redstone tube is currently around 4.5, so it's emitting a redstone signal of strength 9. So that's why we were losing pressure automatically as soon as we place down the tube. If we put this guy further down, we'll note that there is no pressure loss until it receives a redstone signal. So the strength of the redstone signal determines the level at which it's going to stop emitting. And what do I mean by that? Well, those of you guys who are good with redstone probably know that redstone now and the newer versions of Minecraft have different levels, and we can take a look at that. So if we run this guy right here that's super close, it's going to start emitting very quickly. That's probably level 14, so the math on this pressure valve is 14 divided by 2 is 7, so the pressure threshold is 0.5. So that'll keep emitting until the pressure threshold gets down to 0.5. If we want it to be something lower, we can just make this guy longer, okay? And according to our friend Whala, we'll see that our redstone power here is 5, okay? So if we take a look at the value there, 5 divided by 2 is 2.5, and 7.5 minus 2.5 is 5. So once this guy gets up to about level 5, he's going to start emitting. So let's actually move this guy a little bit closer. I'm going to put the lever here, and that should be emitting. So now we're at power 7, so that's 7.5 minus 3.5, which is 4, so that'll continue emitting pressure until we get down to level 4. And once we hit number 4 here, it should stop releasing the pressure. Let's see what happens. And as you can see here also, this guy is emitting a redstone signal based on how much pressure is inside. So right now it's emitting a power of 8. And if we give this guy a little bit more time to drop down, we should see a little bit different. So if you listen carefully, you'll see that it's kind of stopping and starting again. That's because these guys are continuing to add pressure. So I'm going to break these both off. and that'll stop pressure from being added to the system. This thing's already turned off, as we can see, and now it's kind of balancing itself out right around 4 bars, and it's stopped emitting air. So now that we're no longer adding pressure to the system, we're stabilized at 4 bars. It's no longer emitting because of the redstone strength that we've applied here. Pretty neat, right? So you can really balance out, based on the strength of your redstone signal, how much air to allow to stay in the system. So the safety valve is a bit of power loss, technically, but it does prevent explosions, which is probably a good thing, right? Your other option here is the pressure regulator tube. What this does is it stops pressurized air from traveling through a tube when a certain threshold is reached. So if we don't want this pressure chamber here to get above 2, what we could do is install a pressure regulator tube, and we could put that guy right here. Cool. Looks like that actually has to be vertical, so let's stabilize this. I'll put it right here, and then we'll put the pressure tube, I'm sure I've got one somewhere, right there. So what this does is it only lets a certain amount of air travel through, and it won't let it get any higher through there. So it's basically going to regulate the pressure, and we'll see here that it's dependent on the redstone signal control again. So since these things are all balanced out, we're in pretty good shape. But let's make it so that only a small amount of pressure is allowed into this network. So if we put a redstone strength of 14, then the pressure regulator tube is 14 divided by 2 is 7, so only 0.5 bars of pressure are allowed to pass through this pressure regulator. Okay, so what that should do is, once this guy has drained out all his pressure, which I'll do now, and we're going to close it back up. There we go. This thing should only be allowed to reach about 0.5 pressure. There we go. So even though we've got 2 pounds of pressure over here and 0.5 pounds of pressure here, the pressure regulator is only letting a certain amount travel through, and it's not going to allow any more to travel through unless we weaken the redstone signal. If we weaken the redstone signal, as we can see here, then more pressure will be allowed through, and it'll stop right around probably 1 or 1.5, something like that. Cool, right? And finally, we've got here the flow detection tube. This guy also emits a redstone signal, but it's a little bit different of a redstone signal emission than you would get from the pressure gauge. The pressure gauge measures pressure, which is basically how much pressure there is in the network. Flow detection measures how much air is flowing through a pipe. So let me demonstrate that by preventing any more movement. If I remove the things that are adding pressure to the network, what we're basically going to have is the network continues to have the same amount of pressure, which is currently emitting a redstone strength of 2. It's 1 bar. But you'll notice that the flow detection tube is no longer detecting the flow of air. Even though there's still air in there and it's all stable and pressurized, it's no longer flowing. There's no air traveling through this. It's just all stable and still and just sitting there, doing its thing. If we were to break this line here, we'll see that we're quickly letting out all the air pressure. This thing is now emitting a redstone strength of 15, where this guy is quickly losing his pressure. And once he reaches down to 0 pressure, we'll see he's no longer emitting a redstone signal. All the pressure has been lost in the network, and this thing is quickly dropping down, power level 3, 4, 2, almost out, and it'll basically, eventually, all the air is gone, and it's no longer emitting power. So this measures how much air is traveling through this pipe at the moment because of the machine using it, or because the power is being generated. This measures the overall pressure in the entire system. A pretty important difference. It's pretty complicated, so if you guys are into it and you're really crazy about it, it's a lot of fun to kind of mess with and see how stable you can make your systems. But like I said, you don't really have to. If you're just a little bit careful, you probably won't have explosions. Finally, guys, if you're not super good at doing math in your head, there's a nifty tool that I will show you how to make and power later, because you're going to need a different tool that I haven't shown you yet on how to power this thing, but it's called a manometer. And basically what it does is allow you to read the pressures inside a network. So let's see what this does. Remember I told you that the safety valve here, which I've got set up, let's see, safety valve, will go ahead and allow you to, let's see, where's safety valve in here? Of course, I probably don't have one. Basically, is 7.5 minus redstone divided by 2, basically, or times 0.5. So because this redstone power here is 7, okay, the calculation is 7 divided by 2 is 3.5, 7.5 minus 3.5 is 4. Now, the manometer is cool because when you right-click on a block, you can see the current pressure inside that block. So we can see there's 7 bars of pressure, or 3 bars of pressure pretty much everywhere. But when you right-click on blocks like the safety valve, you'll note that the threshold is being told to you as 4. That's exactly the number I told you it should be, right? So it's 7 divided by 2, 3.5. 7.5 minus 3.5 is 4. So you can check if you're not super good at doing math and you just want to make sure that the safety threshold is where you want it to be. Use the manometer and you can check that out. And it works with most of the ones that are controlled by Redstone. And the only other thing to note about tubes is that there's similar versions that are called advanced tubes, and they're basically pretty much just tubes that can allow more pressure to flow through without explosions. So they're obviously going to be more expensive. You're going to actually have to use something called an assembly controller to go ahead and create these advanced pressure tubes, and they require a block of compressed iron to make 8 of them. But then from there you can go ahead and do whatever you need to do to get these guys switched over to the advanced version that does all kinds of other cool stuff. So a lot cheaper to make the simple pressure tubes, just a basic crafting window with compressed iron and glass. Advanced pressure tubes can hold a lot more pressure before they explode, but they are a lot more expensive to create. So here's a pretty nifty setup that I've built here, guys. What I've got is a safety valve here set up to turn off once it's gotten to about 4 pressure inside the system. The pressure gauge here is emitting a redstone signal, and the redstone signal is of course weaker as it gets further away. It's already built up to a signal of 4, and I'm going to set the air compressor here to only run when it's receiving a low redstone signal. It means it turns off if it's receiving a redstone signal at all. So we've currently got it emitting 4, and as the pressure builds up, and I've just got these 3 guys here running just to speed this process up because it actually takes a while to build up a decent amount of pressure. But what should happen here is eventually this guy will get to the point where he turns off the air compressor. So let's watch what happens. We're currently at a redstone power of 4. And we've just hit a redstone power of 5, which means we're getting pretty close. We haven't quite hit the point where this guy's receiving a redstone signal yet, but he should be soon. And I think once this guy hits a redstone power of 6, we'll actually see this work. So let's see, it's getting pretty close. And here we go. So redstone power is 6, which means we should be emitting power to the air compressor. And you can see I placed wood there instead of coal because I wanted to demonstrate how quickly this thing will turn off once it's receiving a redstone signal. So just for demonstration purposes now, I can get rid of these guys, which were there to speed this process up a little bit. And now he should no longer run. I guess we need one more level of strength here. So let's wait until this gets up to 7. Oh, no, wait, I think I know why. I actually changed it to ignore by mistake. There we go. So now we can see it's no longer running. So we're no longer adding air to the system. It's nice and balanced. If any air was lost from the system, like that, it would automatically turn itself back on once it got down below a level that it needed to get to. You can see there it automatically just turned itself back on, and it's going to start adding air back into the system and automatically turn off once it gets back up above a certain threshold. Pretty cool, right? So there's a lot of automation you can do to make sure that you've got the proper amount of air pressure inside your systems here. You're probably going to need a couple different systems because a lot of the machines that we're going to check out require different levels of air pressure in order for different levels of operation. So, you might have all one giant system. That's cool if you do. But you might also have separate individual systems to power different machines and different things that you want to get going. So it's a lot of fun to kind of play around with this. As you can see, I almost spent this entire spotlight demonstrating how air pressure works and how to use the pressure chamber and the air compressor and some of the other advanced features of just generating and building up pressure. Once you've got it underhand, though, it's a lot of fun to maintain. Now, with that said, we're going to have to come back for part 2 of the mod spotlight, where we're going to check out some of the really cool machines that are available. So there's a lot of different things you can mess around with once you've built up your air pressure. There's some cool stuff. We already saw the assembly unit that's required to make some of the things. There's also things like pneumatic doors, there's elevators, there's security station, there's a sensor, a bunch of different stuff. You can also see there's some interaction with industrial craft and some interaction with buildcraft that's available. And this guy is one of my favorites, the aerial interface we'll check out as well. And then I'm really most excited to show you guys something that's really cool, which is the drones. Drones are very neat. I can't wait to show you guys because it's something that I think is going to be a lot of fun for everybody to play with, even if you don't really know how to program. So, and then there's of course a couple nifty items too. So we're going to play around with this. Part 2 will be coming up to show you some of the machines. I might get to the drones in part 2, or I might wait depending on how much content I fill up in part 2. Part 3 might be specially designated for the drones. We'll kind of have to see how part 2 goes. All right, for now, this is Direwolf20 signing off. Hope you enjoyed the mod spotlight on PneumaticCraft, and take it easy.